Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 or 2 of the Ceres podcast. I'm your host, Stelios, and the founder and director of Ceres Pure Food Innovation. How are you all feeling with this weather? It's a bit better. I know I was whinging in the last one, but whinging is what I do best. To be fair, I can deal with this wet weather. Yeah, I know where I stand. I can warm myself up, but when it's hot and it just can't cool down. So I really feel glad for you guys in the kitchens and the hot fish and chip shops and the pubs and the restaurants. At least you can get a bit of fresh air coming through. Quick online store update. We've recently added some new stickers to our online store. I think they look brilliant, but I'm biased. We've got fried to perfection, look awesome, nice seal for the packaging there, a gluten-free label, and also our new I Love Fish and Chips label, which again, nice and quirky, they look great, and they give your packaging just that nice little finish. So they're on our website now. We're also ramping up production of the fish cake mix, mushy pea seasoning, and seasoned rice flour. They seem to be flying out at the moment, so thank you to everyone that's ordering. We are sort of running short to some degree, but if you do need it, order it. We'll get it sent out. I'd rather it was with you than with us, then you're not left short. If you are thinking of placing an order, just order it as soon as possible. We have also added a new product today. You'll see it when you hear this, obviously, but we've added a 2-litre batter bottle. They're nice, big, strong bottles. Forget about having, old crappy bottles that you bought from the supermarket and you're refilling, having buckets of water in the fridge. These 2-litre batter bottles, they're strong, they're stackable, they're reusable, they're washable. They're just great. You fill them up with cold water and you're ready to go. They've got measuring guides on them. They're just brilliant in my view. And, like everything else, just visit worldofceres.com/shop to order them. As you may have noticed, we've started adding these little adverts to the beginning of the podcast. We're never going to add ads in the middle to break up the conversation, so we hope this is all cool with you. It gives us a chance to highlight and support what we do, but what others do too, and they support us, so we want to use this platform to help them. We have a lot of changes coming to the Ceres podcast over the coming months. I'm not going to make any big announcements because there's no point, and I may change my plans as I go along. So you'll notice every now and then a little something is going to be different. And if I don't announce it now, if I do change my mind, I don't have to go back on myself. So on to the ads. To get a little technical, polyphenol oxidase enzyme, PPO for short, is responsible for browning in potatoes and apples and so on. So if you cut an apple or a potato, peel it, the air gets to it, it starts to look horrible. The PPO reacts with the oxygen surrounding the air. This reaction can be slowed down or stopped altogether by changing that environment, an environment that contains something else for the PPO to react with instead. So stop oxidation in its tracks with the Ceres potato preparation. See what I did there? Used correctly, it will completely evaporate when the dried prepared chips or potatoes enter the hot oil or the hot environment. It just goes with the steam and the water. So don't try and go it alone and have horrible potatoes or horrible chips or whatever. Use a professional product like the Ceres potato preparation. You can order it today from worldofceres.com/shop. This episode is also brought to you by Bizimply. Are you sick of messing around with, the staff issues? Just now, in between my break, between doing this and another podcast, I had a text message from good old Charlie Collins saying, staff are doing me head in, this just happened. Bizimply is going to help you get on top of this. Maybe not his issue, but it will help you. The fact is that, staff, you need them. You're serving food, hospitality. It's a hard turnover of people. How do you keep on top of training? How do you keep on top of HR? How do you keep on top of just their shifts? You can't know everything. You've got a million jobs. This is where Bizimply comes in. It's an all-in-one operations, HR, rota, and workforce management software designed and brought to you by hospitality specialists. There is a time station app to prevent time theft and buddy punching. I didn't know what buddy punching was until I spoke to Bizimply. So basically someone checking in for someone else. The My Zimply app gives you live time and attendance, but also tells your colleagues their shifts and roles on a given day. There's so many features, but I think one that I like is, one of many, but one that I like is the fact that it does integrate with Xero, the accountancy software, and many others. But also the business insights, no more guessing, trying to see, did I have too many staff on this Monday? Too many on a Friday? Too little? A lot of the time we think, I don't want to have too little staff, but having too many staff, it's just as worse. So you need to find that balance, and Bizimply can start giving you those insights. So stop stressing, visit bizimply.com, and get yourself a free demo. Get it sorted. So thank you to the episode sponsor, Bizimply. Today's podcast guest is Chef Martin Cahill. Martin's worked for numerous high-profile and luxury hotels across Americas, Asia, Middle East, for notable groups like the Mandarin Oriental in Asia, Rosewood Hotel Group in London, and Duke's Hotel in Dubai. Martin has now flown the nest and is going it alone in the Isle of Mull in Scotland. It's a little island and it's going to be a little bistro called the Galleon. I genuinely can't wait to drop in on my travels. Anyway, enough from me and onto the conversation with Martin. I really hope you enjoy. Martin, welcome to the Sarah's podcast, mate.
Hey, morning, Stelios. How are you?
Not bad. How's it going up there?
Good. I think summer's officially over. So we had a week of blistering heat. Now we're back to British winter again. Floods, rain. I think it's like 4 seasons in one day. But no, it's good to be chatting and good to air a few things that I think we've talked about off the record, so we can get the feedback from the public. That
photo you just sent me was nice. Nice photo.
So I'm from Manchester originally. So we bought a restaurant in Scotland. So I think, mate, as we've discussed many times, COVID's the key word now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So COVID's affected a lot of people in many ways. And I was an executive chef in hotels for 15, 20 years, expat in that. Like, I've worked in all continents. And I thought to myself, if ever I'm going to do this with the wife, it's now or never. So little 30-seater bistro, why not? It might work, Stelios. It might crash and burn. But my advice to people is just give it a go. I was always cautious, mate. But why not?
You've been all around the world, you know, you've been London, you're from Manchester, all around the world, you know, Middle East, Asia. Yeah. What makes you end up in the Isle of Mull? Like, you know, I did check it on the map this morning and I thought, I've done Scotland, you know, I travel there a lot for work. And this is like, you know, it's the Hebrides. And the joke is, I'm going to be sent to the Hebrides, you know. You know, so how did you end up there?
Okay, so for many years I was in Hong Kong. I was 10 years with the Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong, or 8 years actually, but I did a couple of years in Taiwan with them as well, that company transfer. So every summer, my wife, to be fair, this is the link. My wife is Scottish, but the kids were born in Hong Kong. We got married in Hong Kong, like we were Hong Kong residents, long story. But a few summers ago, we started coming here on holiday, and we just sort of, what happens, Stelios, and I'll be honest with you, you get to Oban, which is on the West Coast, and you get the ferry from Oban to Mull, right? And when you're on the ferry, all of a sudden your phone signal drops off, you can't do anything. You've got no choice but to relax. Now, coming from a huge city like Hong Kong or London, your mind's constantly turning. So when I came to Mull, I thought, my God, this is relaxing. And then we thought about buying a place here as a holiday home, and we never got, you know, we procrastinated as chefs do, and we got busy. And then, so fast forward a few more years, we'd been again on holiday, loved it. Just complete peace and tranquility. And then I was in Singapore with my last posting, my last full-time posting. And sadly, obviously furloughed, as most expats that I know. If you know the expat lifestyle, housing, schooling, salary, it's inevitable that it's not sustainable to earn that money and that lifestyle. And the boss say, Martin, carry on, keep working. No, Martin, you're probably one of the first ones to go. So my wife saw this place for sale. And we thought, listen, let's put an offer in. Why not? So long story short, Stelios, we've not moved here to be like a chain of restaurants or a sort of conglomerate. We've moved here for a lifestyle choice. We've got 2 kids, and moving here, it is a lifestyle choice. I mean, when I worked at Rosewood in London, I was commuting in 45 minutes to an hour, train, Liverpool Street, back to Holborn. And this, mate, I spoke to you this morning, I walked to work. My fisherman brings me lobsters and scallops and mussels literally 2 minutes away. So chef's dream, and I think just a lifestyle choice that I think I've put my life before my career for once.
Yeah. Well, now you can merge the two, I guess, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, look, I won't kid yourself. When you're in London or when you're in a big city, you get the exposure, you get the networking. Listen, here, there's 2 pubs, there's another cafe, and there's us. And the staycation market is booming. We're not open just yet because we're decorating. We did a bit of painting and decorating. And testing some dishes, but we won't make the national news. But when you're younger, when you're a young chef, you think about fame, you know, glamour, working with all these famous chefs, Michelin. I think you get over it at some point. And what suits me now is a bit of peace, bit of quiet, and a little bit of family time, you know?
I don't blame you, mate. I don't blame you at all. So, you know, when you start ramping up PR, that means going to the 2 local pubs, you know, and getting them round, getting them to try the food, you know.
Yeah, no, but I think, mate, what's nice now is when I was younger, like a lot of the people you've interviewed on the pod already, back in the 80s and 90s, being a chef wasn't a career, it wasn't a trade of like it is now. Like if you say to people now, I'm a chef, oh, wow. I've staged at Noma and I've staged at, you know, here and there, and I've started. When I in the 90s, mate, if you were a chef, you were kind of like, you want to be a cook. like when I went to London, Gordon Ramsay was renting the aubergine. Like it wasn't Gordon Ramsay. Like Gordon Ramsay was just a chef. I used to bump into Gordon Ramsay when I went to the Dorchester. Used to bump into Gordon Ramsay at Gloucester Road doing his shopping at like midnight. It was a like late supermarket. He was with his missus, Tanya, and he'd be getting his eggs and cream and milk, probably to make his posh French toast. And I'd be getting a pot noodle and a packet of fags. But being a chef then, it wasn't what we could think it is now. You walk into a bookstore now, mate, it's full of cookbooks. Go back 20 years, Delia, bit of Nigella, you know, Mary Berry. Now the industry's changed a lot. And the question is, has it changed for the better or has it changed for the other way? I wouldn't say worse, but
well, you know, you mentioned Gordon Ramsay, and I remember buying his first couple of cookbooks, but they weren't cookbooks for people at home. They were cookbooks for chefs. Like, and then I think he realized when he started to become a consumer facing brand, oh, you know, forget those. Let's do, you know, cookbooks for like, you know, and you know, he's really catapulted himself massively.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned this on the phone the other day, like. I think some people that come into the chefing industry see people like him, see people like Jamie Oliver, and think that's what I'm going to be, you know. And now don't get me wrong, they're entertainers that have come from a cookery background or a chefing background. You know, they're not chefs strictly anymore, I guess, are they?
Well, I think where and we touched it again. We're going to say a lot of things that we've said already, kind of, because we're talking very casual, but. I think COVID, you're gonna see a change in the industry for many reasons. Like we won't talk about Brexit because we haven't got time, mate, and I'm not into all that anyway. But I just think a lot of people have left the industry, whether it be Brexit, COVID, and I think a lot of people, mate, have been disheartened. They came in thinking one thing, and after a few months, they've thought, not for me. Like, and I'll tell you a funny story, mate. I was in one hotel, right? English hotel. I was in London, yeah. We got a last minute function, right? Last minute function, 12 people, VIP, tasting menu, had to be looked after. Quite happy to stay. Like my missus knows that I'll be home whenever, like just whenever the work is done. And I said, right, last minute function, check the fridge, got the menu, and I spoke to the pastry chef. And then I said to like a couple of chef de parties, listen, I know you're on a middle or an early shift. Can you stay? And they both said to me, no, we've got plans tonight. My girlfriend's got cinema or I've got 10-pin bowling. I'm like, and I looked at them, I thought, you having a laugh? Like, because our generation is your work, whereas the new generation, and I hate to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, for them, it's just our job. Whereas you've got to embrace that passion and you've got to make sure that we keep the industry passionate. So that means paying fairly, good hours, not just lip service. A lot of hotels say, yeah, work-life balance, we pay fair, we pay competitive rates. Bullshit, mate. Like, it's not. Like, we have to, like, when we talk about the tips and the service charge, give it to the staff. Give it to the staff. Like my brother-in-law, he works on a building site and he's a carpenter, skilled guy, yeah, super skilled guy. And he was saying, look, if you come to work for me tomorrow, if you come to me and sweep the floor and do the basic menial task on a building site, I'll give you £25 an hour. And you think about a coffee barista or a commie chef, what they get in London, £9.50, £12.50. What's an agency chef? 15 quid. Still not even touching the surface of some careers, mate, which I find ludicrous.
It's a tough one because, you know, if wages go up, you know, I spoke about this with Ben Tish, and you know, wages go up, it's gonna reset a few things, and it's gonna test a few business plans, and you know, and I don't think, you know, people are quite ready for paying more. And I think obviously I'm sort of devil's advocate. I've got no dog in the race, you know. I think ultimately, if people work hard, they deserve to get paid more. If they're good workers and they work hard and they put in all those hours, I think.
Well, Stelios, with all due respect, I wonder, and it's a question that people might answer back or comment on. I wonder, the places like, again, with all due respect to them, because it serves a purpose, places like Nando's and Pizza Express, and when people say I'm a chef at Nando's, yeah, not chef, but you know what I mean. But I wonder if you go to Nando's and pay, what is it, £8 for a chicken burger? Do people think if they go to a proper restaurant and we charge £12 for a homemade burger, homemade bread, homemade chips, do people see the value of that? So it might go back to the customer or the consumer,
Yeah, I think they've got to open their eyes too. But I think what sort of happened is that, and I've said this for some. Well, I was reading an article a while ago, and it was pre-COVID, if you can remember what that's like. And it was an article with Sat Baines, and he says there isn't a skill shortage, there is an abundance, an oversupply of restaurants. And it made me think, if you think today, go back in the 90s, like you said, people went out to a nice hotel or a nice restaurant. Restaurants, you didn't go to a restaurant 3-4 times a week. And now, because of the likes of Nando's and even McDonald's and all this, people do end up in a restaurant probably a couple of times a week at least, I'd say. Even and I hate to use this word, but even the impoverished of the society, the people that probably can't afford it. We live in a society now where, years ago, if you were skinny, that meant you were impoverished. Now, if you're fat, you're impoverished. So I think in some ways, restaurants, the definition of a restaurant has expanded somewhat, I think. Whereas before it was to go for a dining experience, and now it's just to get fed.
But also, Stelios, I think as well, the word loyalty, we could talk about loyalty. I don't think there's much loyalty left as well. For example, when I'm from a place called Bolton, right? It's not exactly the food hotspot of Europe, right?
I can see why you say Manchester now.
Yeah, I'm in denial. When the football team did well, I'd say Bolton. Now I'm like, yeah, I'm from near Manchester. Now we're not in the Premier League anymore. We ran out of money. Anyway, so I'm from Bolton. Now, years ago, when I was growing up, there was a restaurant, and it was called Tiggy's, right? And it was a family-owned little Italian, 40 seats, all the guys running around swearing in Italian. Just it was ran like a madhouse. But we'd go there for mum's birthday, dad's birthday, wedding anniversary, my birthday. I've got 3 sisters, so all 4 of us' birthday. We were loyal. Now, this day and age, who's loyal to any one particular restaurant? Because there's choice, right?
Yeah.
In central London now, Stas, if we meet up in central London, say we're in London for business for a week, we could eat lunch and dinner in 14 different places the whole week and have a great experience. Whereas, like you just said, back in the day, that's our favorite pub, that's our favorite little Italian. And in a way, maybe that's what I like about being on the Isle of Mull. There's 4 restaurants, 4 little places. People have no choice to be loyal and local. So that's my opinion. But I do think that the consumer dynamic has changed as well. But also touching on the point about you said about go back again a little bit. Sorry.
That's all right.
I went to Tokyo a few years ago, right? It was with work, but I tagged on a few days as well. And I was talking to the chef of the hotel because I knew him from my company, and we're chatting away. And I was watching the guy make sushi, right? And this guy was making the most beautiful sushi, like tight rolls, nigiri, beautiful. And I said, is he your main guy? He said, no, he's just a cook. He said, we're not allowed to call him a chef until they've done 7 or 12 years of trained sushi. So this poor guy, I say poor, this guy dedicated himself for, let's say, 7 years, cooking rice, washing rice, doing the bins, doing the floor, to then be allowed to be called a chef. I'm like, wow, can you imagine the dedication that when you get that title, okay, Stelios-san, you're now the chef. Wow. Whereas UK, where are you a chef? I'm a chef at Nando's. All right. That's my point. The word chef gets bandied around very easy.
I know where you go with it. And I was chatting to someone on the podcast recently. It's not gone out yet. And I explained how I saw a video. This guy, he spent 7 years learning how to fillet mackerel. The restaurant only makes mackerel, it's barbecued mackerel. And he's been doing, I can't remember the exact timing, but 7 years just filleting it. And then it's 3 years to learn how to get the charcoal right. And you think,
Oh,
and he's not a master. Apparently, it takes like 20 years to become a master of this,
right.
and it's a craft. It's a proper,
Mm.
So I get where you're coming from. I don't want to denigrate the chap that works at Nando's, but at the same time, I know where you're coming from. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think this is probably where America has a better terminology on names. Someone that works at Nando's in America would be probably called a line cook, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You know, and I think in England we've just sort of lobbed it all into one, and it just comes under chef.
Because I was in Canada for a while. I worked in Toronto for a while, and I always liked it in Canada. I never thought, I never knew why we didn't implement it here. There was always a guy on the other side of the pass, like he was called an expediter. So you got the chef plating, and you've got the expediter full time. I'm not talking like a waiter or a junior. I'm talking like an assistant manager, and he'd stand on the pass and expedite all the tables. I'm thinking that's brilliant, but we've never seemed to embellish that role here in Europe. I think maybe it's like cost or arrogance from the chef, or I don't need someone. And all this person would do in Canada was make sure all table 7, side dishes, salad, main course, went to table 7. Whereas in this country, there is, like you're right, terminology is a big thing, I think. But yeah, chefs and the UK, how we work is very, I think something should be addressed there as well. But I think that goes on to something we might touch on later about the government support as well. I know there was talk about a government hospitality minister, but I'm not sure whatever happened there.
I think, like anything, everyone's going to be pushing at it, and it's probably something that's being negotiated in the background. A friend of mine says to me, well, hospitality is sort of covered by the hospitality and tourism minister, but it's not dedicated. It is a mixed role, isn't it? So,
yeah.
and I think when the shit hit the fan, like COVID, you could really do with a dedicated minister, couldn't you, really? Yeah, I think the rent issue is going to be a big issue. That's just bubbling away. Yeah, it's just bubbling away in the background, isn't it? But I read somewhere and it said like the government's not willing to pledge anything until COVID is behind, and that makes sense. Like if you're still trying to put out the fire, So I think so. I'll give them a bit of leeway there. But
no, because obviously when COVID first broke, was it last? I forget. Was it last year, February or March? I forget. Last year. So when it first broke, we were in Singapore and we heard about it. And I said to my guys in the kitchen, like in Singapore, I said, guys, listen, this will be like SARS. I said, I just caught the end of SARS in kind of, well, not the end, but we felt SARS when I was in Hong Kong to the ripple effect, like the word SARS was like, oh my God. So I said to my guys in Singapore, listen, guys, don't worry. COVID will pass over. Geez, fatal last words, right? It went global. But yeah, looking for the outside in, what I saw Rishi do and what some ministers did was, I think, credit to them. I think what others did was like it just put us like for example, Stelios, what Singapore did was they closed the airport fast. I'm talking like they shut down travel fast, which sadly meant pilots and chefs and hospitality suffered, but they went to minimal cases within months. Whereas the UK, I think it dragged on far longer than it should have done, So
yeah. I listen to I'm obsessed with this podcast. It's a guy called Tim Hartford, he's an economist.
Yeah.
He's written great books as well. And I listened to it and it's called Cautionary Tales. If anybody wants to listen to a podcast, just listen to that. And he talks about near misses and how we learn about near misses. And he says, look, it goes, I don't judge the government too harshly about what's currently going on. But let's say we get over it and in 3 years' time, the same thing happens again, then we judge them harshly. Because I think people don't realize that in Asia, they are sort of used to this. Like, they are, so they've had bird flu, SARS-1, so, and SARS-1, nearly finished off Korea a few years ago, like financially, that is.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they realize that the cost on the economy is so great. And also all the medical models or pandemic models that the UK has ever tested were based around the flu, because that's the worst thing we ever knew. COVID isn't actually very similar to flu. So I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just think, the government haven't been perfect. Who is? And, I think that the funny one always makes me laugh is that I follow a very diverse group of people on Twitter, and you'll see one tweet that says, "Oh, the government's absolutely messed this up. They should lock down," and the tweet right after saying the government's absolutely messed this up. They should be completely open. And I think that tells me that like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. Like whatever they did, you think China, these Asian countries. They've got more authoritarian measures. They can do things like, for example, I read a quick article about a guy in South Korea. He left his phone at work, waited till just before curfew, so it was like 8 o'clock at night, jumped on the tube, went to get his phone. As he got his phone, it then sent like just an automatic GPS ping. He then, a few days later, gets a text message saying he got a $5,000 fine.
Why?
Because he left the house when they were in lockdown.
I'll tell you a funny story. So we're in Hong Kong. So I missed SARS, but I was there for bird flu and I was there for swine flu, right? And then where the hotel was, I was in the restaurant on the first floor. So I was overlooking like the Hong Kong central, the central sort of shopping area. And one day we'd finished lunch and I was having a coffee in the restaurant with the manager. I'm just looking out the window and there was this pigeon, right? Pigeon on the floor in the pedestrian area. And I kid you not, mate, they'd roped it off and they'd almost like drawn chalk around it like a murder scene. And I was like, what the it turns out, mate, I can tell you what happened. This pigeon, a bit dim and not very smart, flew into the glass window of a shopping centre, killed itself, right? Pigeon, right? Not the smartest animal. But the way they treated it was like, my God, overreaction. But in a way, mate, I think once bitten, twice shy. Yeah. So I think a lot of countries like the UK's never had a pandemic like this before. I don't know the history of like the plague or but the UK, I mean, sometimes in this country we're not the greatest. For example, when I lived in Canada, right? I lived in Canada, mate, and I would go to work. I kid you not, Stelios, in 4 feet of snow. I'd heat my car up in the morning. I'd put my wellies on. And if the car wouldn't start, which I had an old piece of crap car, I had a Chevy Celebrity, wouldn't start, I'd walk to work. This country, leaves on the line, a bit of snow. We're not the greatest at dealing. But yes, we're British. And
4 foot of snow in Canada, what's that, like spring? What is it?
Yeah, so we're not the best at dealing with adversity. Listen, we've got that stiff upper lip. And I always say to my guys, and I kind of joke, and I'm all about diversity. The kitchen, whether it's the blend of people you have. If you have one dynamic of one person in the kitchen, it's not good. If you have all guys, it's not good. All girls, you need a blend of youth experience, male, female, all the genders. You need a mix of everything just to make your kitchen and any workplace, But
I think we will be tougher because of this. There's no doubt. But I think the problem is, especially in the workplace, it's so hard to push this toughness because now you've got to balance it, rightly so, with mental health. But how do we know how to judge it right? I was chatting to a friend of mine yesterday who's in mental health as an industry. And even she said, sometimes it's really hard to figure out if someone's being genuine or not. And it takes time. And time also means that it takes money because you want to actually find out if it's true or not. Or, and actually, if someone's pretending they've got a mental health condition, well, maybe that's a mental health condition in itself too. So
that's a great segue, mate, because it brings us on because, look, a lot of big companies, and I won't name names because it's not professional, but what they do is once a week, they have a thing called Mental Health Awareness Week, where in the canteen, there's apples and smoothies and fruit juices, and they offer like a yoga or a meditation. And I couldn't help but think to myself, listen, Mental Health Awareness Week, I fully get it. I'm from the generation where mental health is not maybe so prevalent, and we were never taught about it at school. Like my mum, who's almost 80, right? My mum would say, pull your socks up, cheer up. No, there is something with mental health, right? But hotels, it always made me laugh. Like HR would say, right, we're having mental health awareness, chef. Can you put some detox juices on? And I'd say, yeah, no problem, whatever you want. But I couldn't help but think to myself, a week of mental health awareness. What about the other 51 weeks? What about the other 51 weeks when someone feels down? What about at Christmas when they're alone? What about on their birthday when no one, So I often think that, and again, we won't name names here because it's not professional, but a lot of companies, it's lip service. And that's what I don't like about the industry. Like I've taken a break from LinkedIn because there was what really annoyed me about LinkedIn was, and it was a bit like all social media. Everyone shows off their best, don't they? Oh, I've got a certificate for this and an award for this. But what the cap for me, Stelios, was when I was in Singapore. Now, I've been a chef in hotels for 20 years, right? I know a few people. You and me get on great. I've got no agenda. You've got no agenda. It's just mates having a chat. But when I lost my job in Singapore, my company said, right, Martin, we'll give you 3 months for you to leave Singapore. And I said, great. 3 months to leave Singapore. Super. Obviously didn't end well. Like sort of meant like sort of personally wise, but financially and time wise, I thought 3 months, no problem. So on LinkedIn, again, as we said, chefs are a bit proud, right? I never wrote on my wall, looking for work, please help me. But I reached out to what I thought was some solid people. Let's say, Stelios, I reached out to about 20 solid people. And I'm talking like people whose name you would know in the industry. I said, look, if you know something, let me know. Stelios, nothing, zero. I'd say maybe 15 didn't even reply. Wow. Which for me was like, oh, what an industry. Like, and I was just to fast forward, one person, one solid person, a recruiter who I've known for 12 years, sorted me out with something just to tide me over. But we've got to be careful that we don't just give lip service to things like COVID, be together, be stronger, stronger together, mental health, like bullshit. We have to actually do it, not just talk about it. And that's something that big companies, the shiny names that you see, the 5-star, the Michelin star. Yeah, well, practice what you preach, guys, because it goes back to what we said at the start, Stelios. We need people. And young kids now will see through the bullshit. And that's what I worry.
It's tough, though, I think, because I think you do want to judge it right. And I think, there's so much coming against the industry at the moment, whether it's, less people, higher wages, less hours. So you need more people, which there's already less of, and then also, if you have to walk on eggshells, I don't believe in bullying. And, I've worked in the fish and chip industry and we've played pranks and jokes. But I never thought, in my mind, I didn't think it was bullying, if I'm honest, because it wasn't repetitive and constantly at one person. It was just, and lots of stuff got played back to me. But maybe that's just me making an excuse. And I'm human, and maybe I am. But I think if everything starts being thrown at all these chefs, because chefs are chefs, maybe some are really good leaders too and good managers, but most people are just good chefs. And now you're saying to them, well, you've got to be a HR manager as well, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. So it's a real tough one, really. It's real tough.
To be honest, Stelios, I'll be honest. So when I was 25 or 24 when I went to Toronto at 20, which was still fun, right? A lot of fun. Then I spent a year in Sydney. Then I was in Bermuda for 4 years. Like, honestly, Bermuda was a different story. But when I got my first sort of senior role, I was 25, 26 in Hong Kong at the Mandarin. I always remember saying for the first few months, look, it was 1 day off. And it was 1 day off because that was the country policy, not the company policy, the country policy. Unless you had an admin job, you were on 1 day off. So it was tiring, but you get used to it. But I always said to the missus when I went home, I don't mind the hours, I don't mind the day off, but one thing I really miss is the banter. For example, come to work, cup of coffee, cup of tea, little newspaper, crack on, someone's late, then like you rearrange their mise en place, or there's, like you said to us, it's nothing malicious, it's just banter. And I often worry in industries now, like, are we getting too sterile? Are we getting a little bit too, I don't want to say PC or woke. I'm not into all that sort of, I don't want to rock the boat here too much with people saying, oh, he's old fashioned, he's Neanderthal. I'm not. I just think that when we were at school, right, we're a similar age, right? If we were at school and you had big ears or a big nose, it was getting a name given to it, right? There's no two ways about it. Whereas now in hotels and restaurants and all workplaces, listen, rightly so, that nothing should be malicious and nothing should be, hurtful, but there has to be a bit of fun. And by fun, I don't mean HR organizing cupcakes in the ballroom because it's Women's International Day. Listen, that's a bad example, but do you know what I mean? It has to be, you need fun at work. And that's what I worry as well about the industry. Like, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I think so. But it'd be interesting. So do you think, like, working in hotels rather than restaurants only, do you think this was a bigger issue or the same?
What do you mean in terms of what we just discussed?
Yeah. Exactly.
Definitely. I think definitely. And I think what I noticed over the years was when I first went to hotels, the GM was the GM. Boom. GM, managing director, they were the boss. Now, HR looks after the people. Finance looks after the pennies. I've said for a while now, I think finance and HR, they're the machine behind hotels. If the hotel's not making money, finance. If the people are leaving, or, because hotels now do all these like engagement surveys, when staff sit down and give their opinion of what they think about the company and the people. So HR and finance, I think, run hotels, my opinion. Whereas restaurants, if you're a chef patron or if you're if you look at the top chefs that you've spoken to, Stelios, they've got a HR team behind them. But in terms of day to day, most chefs will be in a kitchen just doing their thing. I mean, look, there was some news that broke recently about some bad behavior with some chefs here in Scotland. But, I think that's few and far between. But I do think, and just to segue a touch as well, what drew me to hotels in the first place was the fact it was so diverse. One day you're doing room service, then you're doing banqueting, then you're doing outside catering, then you're doing fine dining, then you're doing cafes. So I love the diversity. So hotels suited me.
Yeah.
But I do think that, yes, hotels have become very much, I don't know, it's a hard one to say without putting people off. But I love hotels. I love hotels to bits. It was my thing for years. But I do think now that you've got to, like you said, you're maybe walking on eggshells. You're really walking on eggshells. And I found my time in hotels towards the end, I found myself 50% behind the desk, whereas I love to be touching food, speaking to the team. It was all very much more admin based.
Like I said to you on the phone the other day, my friend worked at Intercontinental a few years ago.
Yeah.
Good few years ago.
Yeah.
And he was under a chef called Peter Kronberg. He was like I
great
said,
guy. Great guy.
He was like, apparently, I don't know, so I'm talking on his behalf, but he said he was celebrated. He walked through the hotel and people used to open doors for this guy. and I guess that's not the case anymore, I guess, to some degree.
Oh, mate, I'd say, I think we spoke as well. So when I first went to the Savoy in 95, right, Anton Edelman was the chef. So he'd walked. Now, he could have walked to his office through the back way. Oh, no, he'd walked straight through the kitchen. He had the perfect black trousers. He had a chef's jacket on, but it was open at the top. And he had like a dicky bow showing. And you couldn't help but think, you ain't doing no work today with that dress like that. So he'd go to his office, right? Then having a secretary then was rare. Like having a chef secretary was like rare. Like when I went to Asia, I was in 4 properties in Asia. I had a secretary every property. Whereas in the UK, a chef secretary's kind of gone by the wayside now. So Anton would walk in, like dressed to the nines, mate. On his desk would be a fruit platter waiting. She'd go and get him a cappuccino. And I remember once, right, a funny story. I was working on the section and he had a big glass window overlooking the kitchen. I remember once Raymond Blanc came to see him. Raymond Blanc came to see him in the 90s. Raymond Blanc smoking in the office, smoke billowing everywhere. Like it was just a different time. And I think back then, and I'm not saying this because I've got no ego, mate. I've got a little restaurant now, just me cooking. But I think chefs back then, like you said about Peter Kronberg, they had a bit of power. And by power, I don't mean power to abuse, but they had a bit of, how would you say, a bit of authority. Whereas now in hotels, if you want to change a menu, my God, tasting. I do tastings in the end. And like, so the GM would come, the F&B would come, and then you'd get sales and marketing come, and the GM would bring somebody random. And I think to myself, what do you guys know about food more than me? And I think it, because I was polite, right? Yeah. But I'm thinking, like, what do you guys know? Why are you giving feed? Like one girl would say, oh, chef, it's a bit acidic. I'm like, yeah, it's a vinaigrette. Like, what? Like, and I think that's the way hotels are going now. Everyone's got a voice. Well, you hire industry experts for a reason. Let them run. Let them do their job.
Yeah.
It's like we have these like roundtable meetings. I remember in one hotel, it was comical. It was about 11:30 the meeting started. And the meeting was about guest satisfaction. I'm like, right, I get it. Chef must attend, food comments, TripAdvisor we'll talk about later maybe. But so we sat the meeting and the meeting went through till 12. And I'm getting a bit like, guys. And I put my hand up. I said, guys, can I make a comment? I said, it's 12 o'clock. Guest satisfaction. Should we not be on the floor speaking to guests instead of sat here in the boardroom? All right, yeah, let's wrap up. So the point is, we talk about these things. And I think the problem, Stelios, is in big companies now, it's just lip service. I think after COVID, you'll see a lot of people who will get credited for what they did and what they do with actions. And a lot of people will get seen through. And I'm not into karma, but you'll see a lot of places that their reputation for hiring will be just in the gutter, which is sad because they had a great reputation and they didn't follow up on their actions or they're not a nice place to work.
Yeah, no, I get that. What's your beef with TripAdvisor then? Go on, tell us.
Oh, God. Stelios, we had this conversation, but I tell you, so my beef, right, is, First of all, if you're in a luxury property, which I've been in a few, we don't even entertain TripAdvisor, like the Mandarin, Rosewood. We don't entertain it. The comments come because, I think now you can ask not to be listed on TripAdvisor. I'm not sure if that's true or not. You can ask not to be listed, whatever. So if the comments came, we just parked them. We never replied because you just fuel the fire. But my beef with TripAdvisor is this. You've got a lovely couple in, bottle of wine. You know, there's a few glitches during the service. There always is, like waiting for the main course or the beef is not quite medium. Okay, I get it. Things happen in life, right? But then the waiter will present the bill and say, oh, thank you for dining with us. How was your evening? And they'll both say, lovely. Oh, lovely. We loved it. Okay, that's it. That's the case. They've not tipped, obviously, which is a British thing, which we might talk about as well. But they've paid the bill and left. Now, this couple, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, they drive home or get a taxi home. My God, next day, they unload. So, like, I always say to waiters, give the customer the chance to rectify the issue when they're in the property. Don't let them go home and have to comp things or email reply. Like, if Mr. Jones's steak is not well done, give him a new one or comp it off the bill. Don't let him go home and, like, I call them keyboard warriors. They go home and just unleash. Because while I'm at it, there wasn't enough. The toilet roll wasn't the right ply, and while I'm at it, the waiter had a slight stubble. Like, because you know, human nature, mate. One thing leads to another, right? So I think TripAdvisor it's a necessary evil. I've got kids, right? Like you, right? You've got 2 boys. I've got 2 girls, right? But like when we go on holiday, we check if the place has got a kids club, and we check if the place has got facilities. But we'll never base our booking only on TripAdvisor, because there's some fruity people out there that like to write a lot of comments that are like, really? Wow. Yeah. So I think TripAdvisor is a necessary evil, but I think they've improved over the years, and I think now that there's less slander and there's less sort of fake accounts, which is good. But still, I don't see it as a luxury high-end platform for reviews. I mean, think about it now, Stelios. Now with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, you can be just as vocal. Like, for example, a few days ago, I was trying to get hold of the bank. Couldn't get hold of the bank. Like, you're on hold. I sent them a tweet, like, on their board. Within seconds, they replied. So there is better ways to approach companies now. I think TripAdvisor is not the be-all and end-all, in my opinion.
Well, one point of difference I would make is that when we go looking for a restaurant, we aim for something really loud. Because if I'm taking 2 boys in there, just after the lockdown, we just wanted to treat the boy, and we took both of them to Pizza Express. And we went to Nando's first, which is usually loud enough, and it wasn't open. So we went to Pizza Express, and the younger one was just like, no, me go. He just wants to run around the restaurant. Me go. And that's the first thing we look for. But I think you're right. I think maybe, I've always wondered, why TripAdvisor don't make it mandatory that you have to, upload a receipt, for argument's sake. Prove that you were there. But I think also, I think it does go back to where it's compounded as an issue, is that the British don't like to complain in person. I think even years ago, before TripAdvisor, there was those funny old photos, the memes, and the waiter would go up to the couple and say, "Oh, was your meal okay?" And they'd be like, "Yes, it was tremendous." And then they walk off and they're like, "Oh, it was horrible." Then so I do think, and again, I think the other problem is, which is what we alluded to earlier, is that the word restaurant has now, it's broadened in definition. And because people are just going to get fed, they just think, oh, well, I saw this on TV and I was expecting it to be a lot better than that. And I think, so people's expectations have gone up, prices, and also, sort of quality has come down to some degree for all restaurants broadly. So what is it people are genuinely expecting for, I don't know, £10 a head up to, everything has a value, is what I'm getting at,
I mean, like two things there, mate. One we touched on before was about America. You go to America, like, obviously I've worked in North America, and you've been on holiday there, so you know how it is. So the waiters, they're not paid unfairly, and they all get like whatever their version of the pension is. They've got like a pension that they call it whatever. They get their 401 or their 405. So they get their pension contribution and they get paid fairly. But the big difference is they live off tips. Like when I was in Canada, when I first went to work there, I remember going to this one bar after work. And for the first few weeks, I was always getting served bottles of beer, rounds of beer. And slowly my service started. I was always the last to be served. I was always like, the waiter was, the bar guy was always like almost looking through me. Like, I'm like, hello. It's like, and then my guy said to me, listen, every time you go, just leave $1, leave a Canadian dollar. He said, you have to. So, and I did, and things got better. But from that $1, he would then tip out his fellow barman, the glass washer, and if the guys ordered food, he'd tip out the kitchen. So it was a much better culture, I thought, of how tipping and how service works, because the better you are, the more you earn. Like some of these waiters, man, they leave with like these sort of like, they call them bum bags or fanny packs, right? They leave with cash full, like dollars, because they've had a good night, you know?
So to be the devil's advocate here, that sort of suggests that you have to pay extra to get good service. Whereas in the UK, most people would say, 1 minute, I'm giving them my hard-earned money anyway. Why should I pay? And just to be devil's advocate, you know, I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind either. You know, because a lot of people may say, well, that's not nice that I am there and I am spending money on drink. Why should he look through me until I give him a tip? So there is both arguments there, isn't there?
Again, just to throw it out there. So we're about to open the restaurant here very soon. And I said to the wife, right, it's hard to find staff. People want good service. We will hire staff. But I said, nobody in the local area where we are, I know London does it and the big cities do it, but no one in the local area, Stelios, nobody charges a discretionary service charge. I think in London it's 12.5% or 10%. So we're thinking, listen, on every check, we'll put on the menu, discretionary service. My wife's like, no, nobody does it. I'm like, well, we have to be the pioneers of it, because if you want good service, maybe, just maybe, you've got to start to pay. I'm not saying over the odds, but, you know, and again, I was thinking when you were talking there about food and going to Pizza Express, like, we love watching the Great British Menu, and I've had friends that have been on there, like, competing. But you watch that show, is it on for like 60 minutes or it's on for an hour? It's on for an hour, isn't it? So you get these chefs and they make 7-course tasting menu in an hour. But what no one realizes is they're there for 2 or 3 days, but it's edited to hell. So people feel like, oh my, like your average joke, like my sister or like your missus, oh my God, they've done that in an hour? Like, yeah, that's mise en place and that's loads of work involved. And they have got a bit of help behind the scenes, like peeling veg and stuff. But I just think that like people's expectations now are, wow, I can get this for that. Not really. Like it's a bit of a false paradox, you know. People have got to start to realize that if you want a Ferrari, you've got to pay Ferrari prices. Not that everywhere. Like I just think, mate, like you said, when we go for dinner with the kids, mate, we want something simple, like simple where the kids can run around and paint on the tables, and you know, and the waiter's quite funny. But if it's just me and the missus, we'll go somewhere nice. But we're happy to pay for both scenarios. But I think that the key word here is value for money. I've had some lovely meals at Pizza Express. I've had some shit ones too, you know. So
to be fair, I think you're right. I think for me, I suppose it's different because I'm brought up in the food industry. So it's like, so I respect hospitality staff a bit more than most. And also, you know, you do, if not being funny, if you go out somewhere and it costs you 20 quid a head, you're going to be less sort of annoyed. You know, you're just going to say, you know what, it is what it is. We ate quickly or whatever. But I suppose people do start to get even pickier when they start to hit the £100 a head and think, 1 minute, this wasn't my expectations.
Yeah. To be fair though, if you go out with your missus and you have 1 bottle of wine and 2 courses, I reckon you're touching 100 quid right there. Unless you're somewhere like, I don't know,
Tobermory.
No, mate. We've made value for money with us, mate. It's all value for money, mate. No. But if you go out with your missus, mate, you are gonna, with a bottle of wine and 2 courses, you're touching 100 quid. Come on, easy.
Yeah,
easy.
Gotta be.
But yeah, but I just think, I think, mate, the industry is in a good place, and I think we talked about it on the phone as a point of conversation. Like, if you just said to me, say when I first started in hotels at the Savoy when I was 18, 19, right, Martin, in 30 years or 20 years, you'll buy in all your stocks and sauces. I would have said, no way, because in the Savoy, everything was homemade. Every jus, every sauce, everything was homemade, Stelios. Now, if we did a blind tasting now, and I put out 4 jus, homemade, bought in, shop bought, and then one that was bought in, but I finished it, I guarantee that you could do a taste test with some great palettes. I guarantee that no one will spot the difference. And it's about being productive, and it's about thinking about your time. Like, I mean, yes, these things look, I use True Foods. I think they're fantastic and they make great stocks and sauces. And I was thinking, oh, they've got a price, but it saves my time. It saves my time. And I don't use them as they are. I jazz them up a little bit. But I know Michelin star chefs that buy things in. Well, I say buy things in. They outsource things.
It's like I said to you before, everything's bought in, whether it's vegetables, whether it's fish, but it's not a dirty word, I think. And, I remember watching a video, well, it might have even been an advert, and, Marco Pierre White used to use chicken stocks, and Knorrs, and, so he had loads of cheats, and so do many chefs,
I did a stage once at this 3 Michelin star restaurant. And just to quickly let you know, so if you say now to someone, if a supplier says to me, they'll say, hey, Martin, we've got this fish, but it's frozen. I say, no problem. They say, are you sure? I say, no problem. So when I did the stage at the 3 Michelin star restaurant, we'd get the sea bass in. It'd have the hook in the mouth, the tag on the ear. The thing would be like a work of art. It wouldn't be battered. It'd be a beautiful line-caught sea bass. The chefs would scale it. Wouldn't touch any water from the tap, right? The chefs would scale it. They'd fillet it beautifully. They'd portion it. They'd score the skin a touch. They'd vacuum pack it. Guess what? Freeze it. I'm like, see, if it's good enough for that level, and you're talking 3 stars tasting menu, why is it not good enough for Lucy's Little Cafe in Edinburgh or Tobermory or Mull? I think it's about people's perception of what you do, like the stuff that you guys do. You give it to the chefs, they finish it off. Who'd know? Who would literally know that that's an outsourced or a bought-in product?
No, I think perceptions are a really crazy thing. Like, I think the figure is about 80% of fish and chip shops in the UK are using frozen at sea fish.
Yeah, 100%, mate.
So you've got people that are sitting at the seaside somewhere, whether it's, I don't know, Hastings, Bournemouth, Yorkshire, somewhere, Scotland. Scotland's different because I think the percentage of fresh fish is higher. But, but the point is the same, that people are eating it and thinking, oh, this fish is well fresh. And it is fresh. Don't get me wrong. Like, it is fresh.
But perception, though, like when you, I'm not easy at the fact, though, but when I worked in the hotels, we've done some sort of promotions with them. Now, when they do that dish called Sound of the Sea, where you get the seafood and the waiter gives you the earphones with the waves crashing. So there's something about like perception. So even if I go to the seaside with the kids, Cornwall, Blackpool, if my missus or my kids see a fish and chip van and it's by the water, they just presume or they assume it's fresh. Like you said, frozen at sea, like frozen haddock and frozen cod fillets. That's what everyone uses. But if you park a fish and chip van by a seaside or a harbour, there's queues down the road, mate. There's queues because it's the customer perception, and that's quite psychological. I think it's like I guarantee if you put a steakhouse in the middle of a cow field, I bet it'd be full.
Well, where did you say that? Because I was just going to use that as an example, because where we are in the Midlands, there's a little town called Sutton Coldfield, nice town.
Yeah,
there's Miller and Carter, and
nice.
It's a steak restaurant, and it's adjoined to a farm. And as you're eating beef steak, you can see cows. You can see cows, and I think that works for any free roaming product. I don't think I'd want to eat chicken in a chicken battery farm. I'm not sure it would have the same feeling.
Yeah. So this is just a sort of to move on a touch. So I think. So we've not opened the restaurant yet in Tobermory, but we've sort of gone live with some like social media channels just to get a bit of interest, and we've been asking customer questions and local questions. Now, one thing that's come up a lot, Stelios, a lot of questions. Let's say we get 10 questions a day. I'd say at least 4 or 5 are you serving vegan food? Like the demand. I always knew we'd do a few. But I think moving into 2022, I don't know whether it's a lifestyle choice. Is it an animal humane thing? Is it a health benefits? I mean, I know what the answers are for me personally. I think I eat vegetarian food or vegan food for health. But I just think, I don't know, is it here to stay? I hear there's restaurants now in London that only serve vegan food, so.
Look, everyone's got their own opinion on this. One thing that I'm really intrigued about, and I just did a podcast with Tony Hunter, and he's a bit of a food futurist. Well, he is. That's what he is, not a bit of one. And he talks about the future of food essentially, and he talks about cell-based meats, and I think there's a lot of interest there. If you could eat meats with all the benefits of meat, because it is very beneficial, especially when it's not processed. I think if you could eat meat and no animal was killed in the process, I think that's got to be quite an interesting thing,
Again, to play devil's advocate, like one of your favorites, I was speaking to a very well-known butcher a while ago about opening a restaurant here. And we touched on this. And I said, will it affect you? He said, no, not at all. Because he said one of his hopes with the vegan movement and the plant-based movement was, years ago, my mom would buy the crappiest piece of rump steak and she would cook it to death. I'm talking like shoe leather. And she'd cover it in gravy. We'd all pretend to enjoy it. And my mate, who's a butcher, said to me, listen, Martin, what I hope is instead of people buying meat 7 nights a week, I hope they buy meat twice a week, but they buy quality.
Yeah.
So instead of buying all that stuff in the supermarket that's pumped with red food dye and, and it's sealed in a vacuum seal so it stays red, he's hoping that they buy a lovely meat on the bone, or they buy a nice Côte de Boeuf, or they buy a nice, So his hope and his idea was that people, instead of buying quantity, they buy quality. So I think there is a happy medium somewhere.
Yeah, I think you can see that playing out. Like, my local butchers, we're in a little town, they've got a Himalayan salt fridge where they're drying it out. They've got an aging fridge. And mate, it's a small population, this town.
You must live somewhere really
not posh, at all. And that's really the point. It's really working class, it's really working class. And I think they're doing that as well, because you see on the weekends, the Friday, people are going in for their shop. And I think, but I do think this is a problem. Like, not all meat is the same, and I think that when people say, oh, meat's bad for you, well, no, not all meat is bad for you. And just like not all vegetables are good for you. So, I think I think it's going for a phase at the moment where I think people think vegan food is healthy. Where actually anything clean and processed minimally is great for you. And that's meat.
I mean, with all due respect to us, with all due respect to these companies, if you pick up a burger that's a plant-based burger, right? Pick up a burger that's plant-based, turn over the back and look at the ingredients. There's about 30 things on there. Yeah. If you pick up a meat burger, a good burger's got one ingredient, beef and fat. Yeah. Whereas a plant-based burger is full of, let's say, laboratory ingredients. So
yeah, and I think for me, I think those two things aren't like for like. They're both round and they both go in bread. And that's it. and that's not to denigrate those people that want that burger.
No,
but you know what? If they spent a bit of effort pulsing up some vegetables and some beans and making something that is a vegan burger. And I know it's not what they want, but yeah.
Obviously, opening a restaurant, you want to get ideas. So I've spoken to a few great chefs about ideas, and they said, look, there is a demand. Like, he said, forget this vegan January. He said, we get requests the whole year. So now a lot of chefs just have go-to winning dishes on the menu. I can tell you loads of chefs I've spoken to, and they also, listen, mate, these flavor combinations work. This is great. And even suppliers get it, and they're starting to give more vegan and plant-based options, which I think is good for chefs, because obviously sometimes even I scratch my head thinking, oh, what can I do? So you just need a bit of inspiration. And that's where I think by these sorts of podcasts and speaking to people, it is great. So it's a really good platform.
So with the Galleon opening in a week or so, 2 weeks or?
Yeah, about 10 days. Yeah, half 50% nervous, 50% excited. Yeah,
so is the menu, is it drawing from inspiration of all your years abroad? What's your plans with the menu?
Well, we'd be stupid not to, Stairs, but if we start putting on like fried rice and, sambal curry, it might not go down so well. But listen, to be fair, I'm right on the harbour, literally. I mean, you can't write it. I'm right on the harbour. Lobsters, crabs, mackerel, mussels, scallops. I mean, they have these little things called squat lobsters, tiny little squat lobsters. It's a chef's dream. I've got a dairy which produces only 2 cheeses, an aged cheddar and a blue. That's it, 2 cheeses. I love it. Venison roams wild here. Like, venison here is almost, they have to shoot it, otherwise it becomes sort of more venison than humans. So venison is off the chart. There's beef here as well. So it's a chef's dream in a way. But no, I think I've learned one thing that I have learned over the years, and it's not about produce, it's about technique, how to treat a lobster properly, how to look after a scallop. And I think that's what I think customers here will benefit the most of. It's the touches. For example, there's a fish and chip van on the harbour. Now, I never want to do fish and chips because your fryer is full of fried food and your fryer gets messy. So like, why compete with a fish and chip van? We'll do a beautiful piece of cod, but it'll be pan fried on a nice garnish with a simple sauce. And I think it's like we've got a little bar as well where we'll serve some little like wines and craft beers. And my wife said to me, should we do draft? I said, why do draft? There's a pub next door serving draft. Like, I think sometimes you got to think, well, there's competition, then there's a bit of stupidity. Like, there's a fish and chip, Steph, there's a fish and chip van there, and they've got these like 30-litre deep fryers where they just fry everything. Like, that's not our market. We want the people to come and have a starter, a main course, maybe share a dessert, and have a nice bottle of wine or two. So, and today, this afternoon, I'm going to meet the local oyster farmer. So he just started farming oysters. So I have got an abundance of produce, but I just wish, if I could go back in time, say 10 years, I just wish I'd have done this earlier. It's something that, yes, it's nerve-wracking, because when you've got a job, as you know, you've got guaranteed stable income. But I cannot tell you the freedom that I feel now, like today, like if this was me in a hotel, I'd have a morning meeting, I'd have a team briefing, like chatting to you is my choice, it's my freedom.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I think a lot of chefs should look at what they're doing and think about something. Think about their, you know, I mean, as I said, I think loyalty's dead. I think we discussed this. My dad had one job his whole life. I think those days are long gone. But I do think that I'm excited. Yes, I'm nervous, but I'm excited to bring to Tobermory something that's a bit sort of fresh and clean, like clean plates, less things on the plate, and let the produce sing for itself.
I think if you've got all that seafood on your doorstep, you'd be remiss not to do something like, you know, Frito Misto and stuff like that, like those type of products.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. This we actually. So I have bought. So since coming in here. So I bought a sous vide machine and a vacuum machine, and I bought a new fryer, but I've not bought like a 30-litre floor standing one. But I bought a little tabletop one. So yes, there's a time and a place, but I just think, like I always said, that the best chefs in the world, they can take something humble like a lamb's neck or, you know, a piece of ling fish, and they can make it into something beautiful. Yeah. And having said that, the less you do to produce, Stelios, the better it is. Yeah. The less you have to touch it, the more it stays in Mother Nature, sort of, you know, the way it should be preserved. So, no, I think we'll keep the menu small. I think we're going to change the menu every couple of weeks. Got a couple of chalkboards on the wall. So, yeah, but the one thing that excites me most is I'm speaking to you, we're speaking to other suppliers. It's just like, normally in a hotel, you'd go through procurement, receiving, you know, you'd go through sort of, you know, all the avenues. But here, if I want to buy lobster, I'll buy lobster. And I'm telling you, the lobsters here, they're like monsters. They're like from Chernobyl. They're huge. I've never seen lobsters like them. I'm like, where'd you catch that? He's like, oh, I dropped the creels. And then he said to me, he said, oh, do you want some prawns? I said, I'd love some prawns. And the prawns come like standing up in the little boxes. Now, for me, a prawn is like about, what, 4 centimeters? These things are langoustines. They're monsters, but they call them prawns. Yeah. So I'm just excited to be working with that sort of stuff, you know. And obviously, because it's coming from the harbour, there's no middleman. They don't charge a fortune. Like, it's not extortionate, but and we'll pass that benefit on to the customer.
I suppose, you know, a friend of mine, he's got a restaurant in Scrabster, which is the other side to you. And
yeah, you mentioned,
and he says, like, you know, there's something about buying directly or as close as to the source as possible, and you see how that, you know, their produce helps your business, but your business helps them. And there is this connection. And he says, like, without them, there's no me. And without me, there's no them. And this will be very much like that, I guess, pretty much.
Well, what we want to do is we want to give as much credit to the farmers and the producers and the cheese people as we can. So we want to say that we use the Isle of Mull dairy. We say that we want to use the fisherman's name. We want to use, you know, oysters from the farm. So we want to name check, like the Tobermory Smoker, like the Tobermory Smoker, we smoke all their own salmon, all their own trout. So we want to name check these people so people can say, yeah, we went there and we ate local. Like, I'm not talking carbon footprint or environment, but I want to give people food that is from the area. Like, what's more? What can be more tasty than that, Stelios? Tell me.
You know, and listening to you talk about working in the hotels, and you enjoyed it, but there does seem to be a latency there. From the minute you choose something, it could take weeks, days, months. Whereas, you know, tonight you could say to the missus, "Oh, I'm going to see what's available tomorrow, and it's on at lunch." You know.
Yeah, like just scrub out the chalkboard. Like in a hotel, you've got to change the micros, do a costing, change the system. Like, I get it. I do get why you do that for business, but I'm just excited now to do something that you've got the freedom and the flexibility. Listen, you've got a business, but you're a bit bigger than me, obviously, but you've still got the freedom to do
Yeah.
what you want to do. I think the thing is still, as you live or die by the sword, as all these chefs will tell
How
you.
old are your daughters?
Anna's 12 and Amy's 9.
Prime age to get them in the restaurant then, isn't it?
Now, dishwasher, mate. 2 dishwashers right there. Mate, I was dishwashing at 13, mate. What's
So
wrong
you
with
didn't
that?
need a Winterhalter or a Samick then?
Mate, if they want to come, mate, we'll put them up, mate. I'm telling you, mate. Mate, I tell you, dishwashing, mate, you learn a lot about life.
It's true.
It toughens you up, mate. I'm telling you.
No, it's true. It's my favourite job.
I love it, mate. Honestly, and so the kids will get. But again, just to sort of to wrap up, mate. Moving here was as we said, it was a lifestyle choice. We're not going to make millions from this, but we've got freedom. Okay, the winters are a bit crappy, but the summers are glorious. And moving here, Stelios, is a lifestyle choice for all of us. So. And we hope that people can come and see us and have a break, and we hope that you guys come up.
I hope on my travels I will make my way around there. And
well, you should. I think, mate, what COVID taught me is that you live once. You've got a life to live, and just get out there and see things. And
I think pre-COVID, it was always like I'd always say, "Oh, I want to be spontaneous," but now it's actually force planning those things I want to do.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like I think we almost say, "Oh, if it happens, it happens. It's spontaneous."
Yeah.
Whereas actually, no, you've got to force something. You've got to say, "You know what? I'm going to Scotland. I'm going to make a detour. I'm going to go."
Mate, I was always the worst person. My wife would always book holidays and make me go away because I was always like almost too committed. Then I realized that companies aren't loyal anymore. That companies aren't loyal. If they want you out or you resign, no one's going to beg you to stay. So I think, I'm not saying be selfish. I'm not saying be arrogant, but once in a while, put yourself first. Put yourself first.
Find that balance. Yeah, find that balance. Martin, on that note, mate, I think I'll let you go so you can go have your oyster meeting.
Yeah, I've got a meeting with the oyster guys. So listen, pleasure. And I hope everyone can come to Tobermory and get to Oban and get the ferry over to Tobermory on the Isle of Mull.
Sounds like a very quick journey.
Just a stone's throw, mate. Trust me. Once you hear, it's well worth it, mate.
Definitely. Well, I think you had me at no signal.
Yeah, when you get on the ferry, your signal drops off. Happy days, mate.
Sounds good to me. All right, man. Have a great day.
Take care. Thanks, Stelios. Cheers, mate.
Big thanks to Martin for joining me on the Sarah's podcast. If you want to follow Martin, look him up on Instagram, but I'll also link to him in the show notes. Big shout out to our episode sponsor, Bizimply. Visit bizimply.com today to reduce your staffing headaches. Take the hard work out of rota planning and employee HR tracking. The Sarah's podcast is brought to you by Sarah's Pure Food Innovation.